Hello, I'm Jerry Sampson. This little patch of land in DeVille in central Louisiana may not look like it had much to do with World War II, but it did, just like the entire state. And later we'll find out how. This is a film about Louisiana during World War II, how the war affected the state and how the state contributed to the Allied victory.
I was sitting on the living room floor in Shreveport. We were living in Shreveport, Louisiana at the time. And I used to listen to the Lone Ranger radio show. We had a large radio phono console in the living room, and they interrupted the Lone Ranger to announce that the Japanese had bombed the American fleet in Pearl Harbor. And my father picked me up off the floor. I was about 6, 7, and put me on his lap in his big easy chair, and he said, "Son, I want you to try to remember this day, because this will be one of the most important days in your life." And I never forgot that. And I asked him why they interrupted, and he said, "Because it's so important." And of course, our lives changed dramatically thereafter.
Louisiana, like other states in the South, entered the World War II experience still suffering from the economic devastation of the Great Depression. Despite the best efforts of native son Huey Long to redistribute wealth in the state, the fact remained that most Louisianians were poor. They belonged to the one-third of a nation who were ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-fed, according to President Franklin Roosevelt. As late as 1938, Roosevelt could rationally refer to the South as the nation's economic problem number one.
A lot of people don't realize that up until World War II, that the entire state and most of the Deep South had continued to suffer under the Reconstruction Acts. So what you're talking about is despair, poverty, sharecropping, conditions that did not offer a lot of hope, offered even less opportunity. And when the war came, it transformed that.
During World War II, the South received about $4,442 million in federal funds for war plans, 17.7% of the total spent by the United States. Louisiana received more of those funds than any other southern state except Texas, about $1,773,713,000. The South had also trained thousands of American troops during World War I, and federal officials during the new war again sent thousands of recruits to the area for training. The South and Louisiana became an important region in the national rush to mobilize for war and shared in the economic benefits of that mobilization.
It was during the Louisiana maneuvers that the U.S. really began to undertake the innovations necessary to put a modern force in the field. And these were innovations that the Germans, by the fall of 1941, had perfected. The U.S. is just really starting innovations. And we're talking about things such as taking the horse cavalry and making them really a very tiny part of the Army, turning instead to things like tanks and to air power, and how to get those types, that type of technology working closely with ground forces, in other words, combined arms and joint operations. It's during the maneuvers that the Army really gets their first exposure and experience to doing that. Add on top of that, supplying a modern army that is mobile, that's constantly moving on the battlefield. All those experiences and learning lessons from the maneuvers are what's going to allow the U.S. to perform effectively once they actually get to Europe.
Right up until World War II, there was a much stronger feeling of being Southern, of being Louisianian, than there was being an American. And it's going to be World War II that changes that. It began to make people have pride in being American again. And I would say that's the most profound change. For example, just in terms of celebration of holidays, in this area, 4th of July was not a very big celebration. In fact, it was associated less with the independence of the United States, and instead, the day the Confederate Army surrendered at Vicksburg. And then with World War II, you start to see that change. And out of that, there's this pride in being American. There is a much more revitalized economy. The infrastructure in terms of transportation and communication networks, especially because of the presence of the river and emerging industries along the river and the manpower coming from the rural parishes to fuel the industries along the river, it is a comprehensive change. In fact, you could easily say that World War II is the watershed in development in the Florida parishes, where it emerges from the South or the Louisiana of the past into the South or Louisiana of the new.
World War II brought profound change to America, not only for the nation as a whole, but for the African-American population as well. You have black servicemen being drafted to serve in World War II. They're being asked to fight a war for liberty and freedom and helping out oppressed peoples throughout the world, and they live that dual role of being an oppressed person in the United States. So you see within the civil rights community itself in America this movement towards what folks were calling the Double V campaign during World War II. It's the idea of victory against tyranny overseas, but also victory at home against racial oppression.
Since there was so much opportunity for men, and so many men also went to war and therefore left the region, they had to maintain the home front. And later in the war, in 43 and increasingly so in 44 and 45, they went into the factories as well. So the experience was much different. Now, in the case of the women, the opportunity was there while the demand existed during the war, but then once the war ended, seniority kicked in the factories, so they had to retreat, if you will, from the workplace and return to the home.
World War II also disrupted family life in Louisiana as young men either volunteered or were drafted into military service, as the federal government strictly rationed many items that people used in their everyday lives, and as the focus of life, holidays, and social activities acquired a military caste. My grandfather used to keep up with the war with an old radio that is still in the family. It's older than I am, obviously, but it kept everyone in the area very intensely engaged.
As you can well imagine, because of the large number of men passing through the port of New Orleans, all kinds of organized vice, prostitution, gambling, drinking, you name it, was widespread. Just one specific example, in downtown New Orleans, there was the 2nd District New Orleans police station. In the same building next door with an adjoining door, you could go from one place to the other, was a bookie establishment. Quite literally, cops would walk from the police station into the bookie establishment and bet on the horse races and then go back, even though it was illegal.
As in everything, when you try to figure out Louisiana history, there's a simple 3-word, almost like a koan, which is the river, the river, the river. And what Louisiana provides is this strategic geography. It's the gateway to the continent. Everything that comes in or goes out of the mid-continent comes to Louisiana, and that's been Louisiana's history from the get-go, very, very much so in World War II. You have all the oil and gas from the lower river, the the lifeblood of modern war flows through there. But then everything else, all the grain, all the civilian and military materiel comes in and out of the river. And as in the Civil War, the upper river, middle river manufacturing and industrial base produces so much of the ships and boats and all forms and sizes that makes this war possible. So the river is really critical.